The Gospel according to Mark. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others, Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind on divine things, not on human things." Sometimes it's just better to listen. Sometimes it takes understanding. There doesn't always need to be a response or an answer to a situation. This time, we look at Peter and we see where he does what he needs to do, and we see where he also misses. And so the first portion of our gospel for today, Jesus is asking his disciples, "Who do people think that he is?" And of course, there's a bevy of answers: John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets. It wasn't until Peter responds and he says, "Well, you're the Messiah." Of course, that's the correct answer. Peter was able to understand this through his work with Jesus and being present with Jesus. And luckily, he wasn't swayed by what everybody else was saying. And so he was able to make a better informed decision based on his experience and on his understanding. And he wasn't carried away or swayed by what other people said. However, Jesus continues on with one of 3 main passion predictions that we find here in the Gospel of Mark. And of course, these passion predictions let us know that Jesus is on his way to the cross. And so Jesus is telling his disciples that the Son of Man is going to undergo great suffering and be betrayed by the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes, and he's going to be put to death. And Peter, although well-intentioned, tries to rebuke, tries to dispute Jesus, tries to talk him out of it, and says no. However, Jesus makes his point clear and wants to make his point clear to everybody. And so he rebukes Peter. And he tells the disciples, and he tells Peter, that this is what it takes to be the Son of Man. This is what it takes to be the Messiah. And he tells Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, this famous quote, of course, isn't referring to Peter directly as Satan. But if we look at what Satan means in this context, the Greek, Satan is translated into a stumbling block, that which puts us sort of farther away from God. And that's what's happening at this time, because if they truly believe that Jesus is the Messiah, then they know that he would undergo suffering and death. But Peter, in his well-intention, was trying to put distance between Jesus and God. It's also interesting that the Hebrew context of this particular quote means not just get behind me physically, but fall in line with me, understand, get with what I'm trying to say. And so Peter, out of his emotion, was too quick with this situation and tried to provide some type of resolution. And that's not what Jesus needed at this time. Jesus wanted to let his disciples know dark times were ahead, but they're necessary for the prophecies to come true. They're necessary for him to truly be the Messiah, the Son of Man. And so we see Peter didn't really take the time to listen, or he didn't really take the time to understand this particular scenario compared to the first time when he was trying to figure out who people said he was. Peter is most of us. We jump in, we think without speaking. We always seem to try to look for a resolution when sometimes the situation doesn't call for one. What if a friend or a family member comes to us and tries to tell us information that is very personal or information that is very important to them? Most times, an answer is not what's needed, but being present with the person and being able to let them know that you're someone that they could come to at all times. That's more important. And so let's take the example of Peter, because we don't always have to provide a response. We don't always have to solve a problem that comes up. Sometimes we just need to be there to listen. Listening is important. Being able to understand is important. And our faith works the same way. We don't just make informed decisions right away. We have to let things sink in. We have to explore them, and we have to be able to know and believe from what we experience, what we learn, and what we are able to understand. So as we go forward, let us make sure that we're listening. Let us make sure that we're understanding. Let us not be quick to offer a solution or a resolution, because most times the situation doesn't call for one. Let us go forward. Let us listen. And let us understand. Amen.